Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and this is my card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. I'll have a link to the challenge in my blog post, which will be linked below. But the colors are navy, pink, gold, and white, and the more I was looking at the inspiration piece, I was like, I want to do some metallic watercoloring again. So I grabbed some navy cardstock and I treated it with my anti-static powder tool. And then I have this penny black flower Cascade stamp that I made a card with a few weeks ago. I'll have a link to it at the end of the video that I did regular watercoloring with. So I inked it up with Versamark ink and used my little Fiskars stamp press to stamp that onto the navy cardstock. And then I'm using some gold embossing powder and coating that whole image with the gold embossing powder. And then I'm going to let my heat tool heat up and then melt it with my heat tool, which I say this over and over again, but it never gets old. 13 plus years of stamping and crafting and melting embossing powder just, I don't think it'll ever get old. There's just something about it when it starts to melt like that and it changes. It's just so pretty. So melted that all with my heat tool until all of it was melted. And I'm going to funnel back that embossing powder back into my container so that I do not knock it over, because I do that a lot. And then I just rub my hands against the paper to remove as much of that anti-static powder as possible. And then I pulled out my FineTec Pearlescent and Iridescent palettes that I got not too long ago. I did a video showing heat embossing and then watercoloring on black cardstock with these, with the iridescent palette. And again, I'll have a link to that one at the end of the video as well. So I wanted to try it again, but this time on navy cardstock, because really it's going to work on any dark cardstock. You're going to get this same sort of effect. But I wanted to try it with this. I was originally only going to use the pearlescent, like the gold palette there on the right, but I wanted to use just one color from this iridescent, this kind of pinky purple color. I thought that would be really pretty, plus it kind of ties in with the color challenge since one of the colors was pink. And so I wanted to paint just this big flower with that one. So I sprayed the colors I was planning on using with water. With these are not like traditional watercolors that activate almost immediately with water. You know, you can just touch your brush to them and paint away and you're good to go. These need to be worked up, softened a little bit. You got to fiddle with them because of the little like mica pigments in them. You really have to soften them up with water, mix them around a bit so that you can get that right saturation. It just, once you've used them once or twice, you kind of get what I mean. So that's why I sprayed them. And then funny thing is once it does start, the water does start soaking in, it just softens up the whole thing. So that's where it works to have with these ones anyway, these nice little like metal tins. I use the lids as my little palettes and whatnot. So I just was going along and picking up the color and painting it on. Again, this is just cardstock. This is not watercolor paper, anything like that. But with something like this, I'm not worried about it because I'm not adding heavy amounts of water. I'm not doing any blending or anything like that. If you started doing something like that, because this is just cardstock, it will pill. It will turn into a huge mess. But this, I'm just painting on the color and I'm not using a ton of water. So it's fine. It will warp like the tiniest little bit, but again, not very much, just because I'm doing like small areas and they dry, especially with these, it dries really quickly. So I just went along and painted. It's hard to show on video. Like it looks like I'm losing kind of all the detail of the embossing when I'm painting this, but I'm not. In real life, you can still see all the embossing and then the metallic. That's the thing with these is that changes where the light hits it. It all looks different, but the card is sitting in front of me right now and you can see all of that detail of the embossing. But trying to film this, trying to get pictures of it is difficult. My camera freaks out, especially when the light hits it and that. It's a bit of a trial to show on camera how pretty this is. So I just went along and filled in all little areas with all these different metallic colors. I tried to leave well enough alone, but you guys know me. I like the splatter. It just finishes everything off. So since this dried really quickly, I quickly mixed up a little bit of splatter with one of the golds from the palette. So I just mixed it up and I'm going to scrape it onto the side of one of my acrylic stamping blocks here. So again, sprayed it with water, worked it up a little bit and then scraped the edge of my brush onto an acrylic block. And just got a small amount of that, then got everything out of the way because I didn't bother pulling out my splatter cubby again. So I got gold splatter all over everything, but Gold splatter just makes everything better, so I didn't really mind. And I just wipe it up off my craft mat with a baby wipe. So again, let everything dry, didn't take very long, and then I ran it through my die cut machine with the largest of the My Favorite Things wonky stitched rectangle dynamics. So it's got that nice die cut edge plus the little stitching all over it. And then I cut down some white cardstock to just slightly larger than that to frame it, because the color challenge, it includes white this time, and I knew I wasn't going to have much white going on because I wasn't going to use a white card base. So I did that, and as I was looking at it, I was like, oh, you know how pretty this would look if I painted this like white silvery watercolor on just the edges of this? So I did. Just the very edges, because you're not going to see the rest of it. So I just used one of my little flat Ranger brushes to brush all along the edges of this, and it just creates the most gorgeous pearly metallic look. I love. So I did that. And then I pulled out the My Mama Elephant Congrats All Around stamp set and the coordinating little congrats word die. And I die cut the word a few times from some light pink cardstock. So I die cut that 3 times, and then I'm going to stack those all together using my Tonic Nouveau adhesive. So just applying a really, really thin mount to my first layer here, and then I'm going to stack the second layer onto it. And I have a little bit of time to kind of fiddle and get everything lined up the way I wanted, etc., etc. So I do that twice, so that I end up with 3 layers of die cut here, just for that extra dimension. So once I have all of that adhered, I can get to the rest of the sentiment. And this set has all sorts of different sentiments, but of course I pulled out the one that says on your engagement. So I figured out how I was going to add that to my card, like where I was planning on putting it, and decided I was going to heat emboss it with that same gold embossing powder. So I'm going to line this up on my acrylic block first, and then I'm going to pull out my anti-static powder tool again and just treat that bottom corner there before I stamp the sentiment with the same Versamark ink. So line everything up on my grid mat here, and then figure out where I'm going to put that die cut sentiment, stamp my sentiment, and then I'm going to coat that with the embossing powder, tap off the excess, and then I'm going to melt that with my heat tool. And then once that's melted, cools off for a couple seconds so it's not hot. Again, only takes a couple seconds, but you definitely do not want to touch it when it's hot. I have moved too quickly every once in a while and touched hot embossing powder. Not fun. It's like touching a hot glue gun, like hot glue from a hot glue gun. Yeah, not fun. Anyway, wiped off that anti-static powder from the front of my card here, and then adhered the sentiment. And I did think about coating the die cut sentiment with more of these like pearlescent watercolors, because it would look gorgeous. I did that previous card where I painted the light pink cardstock with one of the iridescent watercolors, and it was gorgeous. So it was in the back of my mind, and I kind of fought with it. I was like, oh, it would look really pretty. But I was like, you know what? There's so much metallic already going on this card that I actually really like just how, like, keeping the die cut sentiment just matte pink. I just think it kind of makes it pop a little bit more. But a person totally could if they wanted to. So adhered that, let it dry, and then applying a really thin amount of the same adhesive to the back of this navy cardstock here. Like I said, thin. Less is more, always. Less is more with liquid adhesive. If you apply too much, 1, it's going to ooze out everywhere, and 2, it will warp everything. The cardstock will warp so bad. So very thin amount, adhered that to my white cardstock. And then my card base is more navy cardstock here that actually just happened to be my scrap drawer. It was already cut down, already scored. I was like, perfect. Saved me the, 2 seconds of time and effort. So I've got that cut down. So it was cut down to 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2. So it'll be a top folding A2 size card. And I'm just going to stamp this flower cascade on the inside again with Versamark ink. And same thing. It was really hard to get a decent picture. It was hard to show up on camera. It didn't help that I was filming at night. I took the pictures at night. But in real life, again, you can just see this. It just gives it a nice, subtle effect. And if I were, to write it to the recipient in this card, I would use like a gold or a silver gel pen. It would just look gorgeous, and tie it all together. So that's what I would do. So I don't have anyone in mind at the moment anyway for this card, but when the time comes. So yeah, finished that, adhered the card front to the card base, decided not to add any other embellishments. I did think about it. I was thinking about like sequins and different things, but I was like, you know what, that metallic just really sets it all off. I'm just going to leave it. But I did pull out, I have some Simon Says gold V-flap envelopes. So I pulled one out and I treated the front of it again with the anti-static powder tool and stamped this flower cascade onto it with the Versamark ink, and then pulled that off the envelope. And then I went through my stash and I have some dark blue embossing powder. I can't find links to this. I don't know. I don't think American Crafts maybe even makes it anymore. I bought this maybe a decade ago. I'm not sure. It's a long time ago. But anyway, it's American Crafts Zing Navy, not navy, denim. They call it denim, but it looks like a light navy blue. So I coated the image with that, tapped off the excess, and then melted that with my heat tool. And again, while I was doing this, I was like, you know how beautiful this would look if you quickly went in and just painted some of these flowers with that same metallic watercolors. It would just be fabulous. But I was running out of time, as always. This is already like massively late. This was supposed to go up yesterday, not today. So anyway, I didn't do it, but it's another idea. And yeah, so I have this gorgeous gold coordinating envelope and this metallic shiny engagement card. So as always, I will have links below the video to my blog post. I'll have a link to the color challenge. I'll have links to the supplies used. All that info will be linked in the description box below the video. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.